and reading, one of the things that you'll see in the rule at the very beginning of each rule is this purpose statement, and it really just gives a concise explanation of what the rule is covering at a very high level. But it's helpful to kind of go through these and understand what's in here, because you can get a really good understanding of exactly what's covered in the rules. So if you're trying to find a specific thing, reading the purpose statement really quick will give you an insight into everything that's covered in this rule. So our purpose statement here, rule 4 covers the equipment that players may use during a round. And then it's based on the principle that golf is a challenging game in which success should depend on the player's judgment, skills, and abilities of the player. And then we must use conforming clubs and balls. We'll talk about those. And we're limited to no more than 14 clubs, and normally must not replace damaged or lost clubs. We'll talk about some exceptions to that have been put in place. And then we're restricting the use of other equipment that gives artificial help to his or her play. So we'll talk about some of those things: rangefinders with certain capabilities, devices that are used in non-appropriate ways. And then the last thing that's kind of important here, we don't want to get sidetracked, is that in terms of the actual clubs and the compositions of them and even the balls as well, there is a separate set of rules that's called the quote unquote equipment rules that goes into much more detail in terms of what specifications the clubs need to meet. That's not something we're going to discuss here, but the USGA, if there are any questions, we will typically send those over to the USGA team, who's in charge of overseeing that here in the US as well as other parts of North America. So that is a separate set that's not in your rule book, that you won't see, that but you'll see it referenced, and that's just a separate PDF or interactive thing that's on the USGA's website. All right, so as Craig has talked about, when we're going through these rules, definitions are extremely important. So again, just these equipment rules here, the definitions, specifications, and other regulations for clubs, balls, and other equipment that the players are allowed to use during a round. And again, these rules are found at usga.org. So if you're an engineer and you like to look at more about this, go for it. But at the event, if we do have a question, it'll be brought to the rover or the official or referee in charge, and we'll consult the resources that are on usga.org to figure out if a club's conforming or not, or if a ball is on the ball list or whatever. All right, so we need to have clubs need to be conforming, right? And a club used to make a stroke must conform not only when the club is new, but also when it's been deliberately or accidentally changed in any way. So if we add, lead tape to it, or we cut it down, maybe we shorten the shaft, or something along that lines, it still needs to meet the criteria in order to be conforming, even after those modifications are made. However, if the performance characteristics of a club change because of wear through normal use, it's still a conforming club. So a good example of this one that I like to share, and there's I think 3 or 4 in the official guidebook, but the one that makes the most sense to me to understand is that, we know that a club that has a pre-formed grip that's typically used as a practice device is not something we can use on the golf course. But if I've had the same wedge for 10 years and there are thumbprints or fingerprints where my hands go and they're kind of, indented into the grip, even though that does kind of do the same thing, it's just normal use. So that club is still going to be conforming in that case there. And then when the rule talks about performance characteristics, that means any part of the club that affects how it performs in making a stroke. So that's the grip, shaft, club head, lie, or loft, including the lie or loft of an adjustable club. So when we talk about adjustable clubs, there'll be some discussion in here. That's a very common question that we get when we're out on the golf course. There's a lot of the drivers now have, adjustable features that can be done. And again, that's something that during the round, we're not going to be able to change. And we'll talk about it here, but I'll just say it up front. If something does become loose, it can be, tightened back to where it was, when we started the round, but we're not able to get on the tee and say, oh, this shot requires a fade, so I'm going to switch my settings for a fade bias, and then the next hole will be like, this is a draw, I'm going to change it to a draw. It needs to stay in the same setting, and if it does become loose, it can be tightened back to the setting that it was on initially. So during the round, if a conforming club is damaged, either during the round or while play is stopped, the player normally must not replace it with another club. However, there are a few exceptions. And so when we go through these rules in the sessions, we always see this exception, or we see the term but. And a good way to think about it, and that was explained to me at various rule schools that I've gone to, is that the specific is always going to govern the general. So we have a general set of rules, but for every set of general rules, we have specific situations that are going to overturn or overrule that specific set. So when we see this exceptions or but, that is really what we're talking about. Is we're talking, these are the scenarios where the rules don't necessarily apply 100% as they're written. And usually the USGA does a good job of laying them out, but sometimes you'll see, even in this rule and others, that you'll say, well, here's the rule except for 17 other things that we list out here, and then in this 17 other things there's 7 other exceptions, and so it can be a little bit complicated to get through all these exceptions, but that's kind of how it's laid out. And you always need to make sure that when you're assessing a situation out there, that one of these exceptions doesn't apply, because in a lot of cases, the exception is going to be what happens out there. So no matter what the nature or the cause of damage, damaged club is treated as conforming for the rest of the round, but not during a playoff and stroke play, because that's a new round, which we'll talk about in Rule 5. So, for example, if I damage my club and I pull a Sergio Garcia and get really angry and slam my club or my putter into the ground and the shaft bends, even though I've done that club is still going to be treated as conforming, even though it might not meet the specifications in terms of the shaft bend or whatever, but during that round, it's still going to be okay. However, if I start a playoff or a new round, I'm going to have to get that fixed. Okay, and then one of the options is you can continue, but you can also have it repaired. But you can't have it repaired that will unreasonably delay play. So you might have it someone, send it in to get it bent back into shape, but you're not going to hold up the groups behind you when you do that. You just have to continue playing, and then when it's ready, it can be brought back to you or whatever. And then there's also the caveat that any damage that existed before the round must not be repaired. All right, and then damage during the round is when the player or when the club's performance characteristics are changed because of any act during the round. And that is including when the play is stopped. So it could be by the player, or it could be by another person, outside influence, or natural forces. Okay, but we'll talk about here in a minute that there is a local rule that was put in place that's going to kind of guide us in terms of if a club is damaged, what our options are. And I think that'll come up here in a second. All right, so this rule here, the section 3 here, we talk about a club's performance characteristics that are changed. So with all this writing here, I think it's important to just think about it as an example. So we talk about this exception. I think it's a good way to start with. So if a club's performance characteristics were changed by using an adjustable feature, and before the club is used to make a stroke, the club is restored as nearly as possible to its original position by adjusting the feature back to where it was, and there's no penalty, and the club may be used to make a stroke. So I might be sitting on the tee and I might think, oh, this is a draw hole, so I'm going to change my settings to a draw. I don't get a penalty just for doing that. I only get a penalty if I go and hit the shot. So if I don't hit the shot, I change it back. There's no issue with that. And that would be the same thing for some other things. I might, maybe I add a bunch of lead tape when I'm not supposed to. If I don't hit a shot and make a stroke, I shouldn't say hit a shot. If I don't make a stroke, then I'm going to be okay. I can fix it and adjust it to its original position and be fine. Okay, and then if we do make a stroke with a club that's not conforming, it's a very harsh penalty. We're going to be disqualification in that scenario there. However, there's no penalty for merely having a club that's non-conforming, and but if we do have that club, it's going to count towards our 14 club limit. All right, so I think a lot of people know we are limited to 14 clubs when we play, and there are some certain scenarios where we're going to be able to replace a club, or if we don't have 14 clubs, we can always add up to 14 clubs. So I might get really angry and pull a Sergio and slam my putter into the ground and snap it in half. If I started the round with 13 clubs, I can get a new putter added to my bag, no problem. But we'll see that if I did that and I started with 14, then I'm kind of SOL and I need to continue on with the clubs I have in that scenario. So this is something that the starter is going to talk to the players about. They're going to, one of the things that they'll say is they'll ask the players if they have, or make sure they only have 14 clubs. We have this come up, I wouldn't say a lot, but definitely a couple times a year. Typically, the main or the situation that comes up the most is you have a mom or a dad that just got done playing with their 7-year-old kid the night before, and they forgot to take their little wedge or putter out of the bag. So it's always just good to have the starters check. But if they do have more than 14 clubs, we're going to have an issue here, and we'll talk about how that penalty structure works in a little bit. Okay, and then once the player has become aware that they're in breach of the rule, they need to immediately take the club or clubs out of play. So if they started with more than 14 clubs, he or she may choose which club or clubs to be taken out of play. And if the player added excessive or excess clubs during the round, the added clubs would be the ones taken out of play. So I think the most famous situation about the 14 clubs rule is Ian Woosnam in the Masters or whatever tournament it was. And, at that point, I think it was on the second or third hole. I can't remember which one it was, but at that point, he had 15 clubs and he could have chosen what club he wanted to pull out. And in this case, I think he took out the second driver that he was using the night before on the range or something like that. Then there's just a note here that says that if a player is picking up another player's club that was left behind, maybe you see a wedge on the green and you pick it up and put that in your bag, that's not a problem. That's not going to count towards a violation of 14 clubs. However, you can't use that club if you pick it up. So players are not able to share clubs except in limited situations where partners are allowed to share clubs as a form of partner play. But when partners do share, the total can't be more than 14 clubs. So, I might be playing with Lee Jewett in a partners match, and we might have 14 clubs and maybe 6 of them are mine and 8 of them are his. That's fine. But if I had 10 and he had 10 and we put them in the same bag, or we were using each other's clubs in those 10 and 10, that doesn't count. Basically, if you think about it, you're only able to have 14 clubs between those situations. And honestly, that's probably never going to come up. Generally when we have partner play, everyone's going to have their own set of clubs, and they're going to be using the 14 clubs they have. But you can't share. So even if I had 13 and Lee had 14, and there was a wedge shot that I wanted to hit that I didn't have the wedge for, but he had it, I couldn't grab it in his bag and use that. The player must not make a stroke with the club being used by anyone else who's playing on the course, even if the player is in another group or competition. And then if they have breached, again, this rule, the player must immediately take that club out of the bag using the same procedure that we just talked about. So rule or section 3 here, no replacing lost or damaged clubs. So what we talk about here is there's a local rule that kind of rides what a lot of this is saying. But if a player starts with 14 clubs or added clubs up to the 14, then loses or damages the club during the round, or while play is stopped under Rule 5.7a, the player must not replace it with another club. However, exception when the replace damaged club when the player did not cause the damage. Okay, so maybe someone else, an outside influence, ran over their bag or ran into their cart and snapped a club. That would be a scenario where it's an outside influence. They would be able to replace the damaged club in that scenario. And when we do this, or when we do replace damaged clubs, again, we can do it. In most cases, there'll be one that we'll talk about here in a second where we can't. But in these cases, we're not slowing down play. So if they need to go back to the pro shop and get a new driver or whatever, we're not going to hold up play. The play's got to keep going, and then whenever it's ready to get back into play, it'll be added at that point. So model local rule G9, which is what GAM uses on our hard card or our conditions of competition. So what this says is that if a player's club is broken or significantly damaged during the round by the player or the caddy, except in the cases of abuse, the player may replace the club with any club under Rule 4.1b4. So basically what this is saying is that if I am near a tree and I'm hitting a shot out from underneath a tree, and in the process of doing that, I snap my club on the tree, with this local rule in place, I'm able to get that club fixed or replace it. So without the local rule, that was not the case. And the reason that this kind of went into place is because a lot of the players that play professionally, that do this for a living, didn't think it was quite fair that if they were trying to execute a shot and something happened that was kind of outside their control here, that they would be penalized and not be able to put a club back in their bag. So makes sense. We're not going to see this a ton in our events, definitely. But the other thing to keep in mind with this is that it says except in the cases of abuse. So if I get angry and slam my club into the cart after I hit another terrible approach shot and I break it, that case, I'm not able to replace it in that scenario. So as long as I'm not doing that, I'm going to be able to replace a damaged club. Okay, and then it talks about here, if a club kind of talks about how when it says broken or significantly damaged, what that means. So it means that the shaft breaks into pieces, splinters or is bent, but not when the club face is only scratched. The club head is visibly and significantly deformed. The club head is detached or loose from the shaft, or the grip is loose. So all those situations would apply. And if we didn't do those in anger, they didn't happen because of anger, we'd be able to replace that. And again, a club face or club head is not broken or significantly damaged solely because it's cracked. Okay, so you'll have that scenario come up. I think we've had that come up a couple times. I think that was the Michigan Amateur at Oakland Hills, if I remember correctly, possibly. We had a player that did that. I know there was some club issue at Oakland Hills, but maybe someone else can remember that
Kyle, somebody did break a club in play, but the original referee told him he couldn't change it because he didn't realize that we had the local rule in. And so we got it straightened out, and he was able to replace it.
Gotcha. Yeah.
That was at Elkwood Hills a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate that. All right. So what happens if we have a penalty in these scenarios here? So this is one of the situations for match play where the penalty is a match adjustment penalty and not necessarily a loss of hole penalty. So at the end of the hole being played or just completed, the match score is revised by deducting one hole for each hole where a breach happened, with a maximum deduction of 2 holes in the round. So here's a good example. If a player who started with 15 clubs becomes aware of the breach while playing the 3rd hole and then wins that hole to go 3 up in the match, the maximum adjustment of 2 holes applies and the player would now be 1 up in the match. Okay, so this is a very unique situation with match play in that it's not a loss of hole, it is just a match adjustment, and we're going to continue playing the hole once it's been notified, especially if it happens mid-hole. We're going to continue to play and then adjust the match after that. In stroke play, it's a little bit more straightforward. It's going to be 2 penalty strokes with a max of 4, and then the player is going to get the general penalty for each hole where the breach happened. So if they have the same example, 15 clubs in the 3rd hole, they realize that they're going to get 2 strokes added on the 1st and the 2nd hole there, but that's the most they can get. All right, and we talked about this before, but when we do add or replace a club under a rule that's allowed, we can't unreasonably delay play. So we're not going to wait on the pro shop to get the club out there. If we got to keep going. We can't add or borrow any club from anyone else who's playing on the course. Hey, keep in mind when we're reading these things, we have to read very literally. So it says who is playing on the course. So if there's someone that finished up their round and they're done, that is open game, and they cannot build a club from parts carried by anyone for the player during the round. So I can't have my spectators carry pieces of a club or a driver to put together in the case that I break my club. I might have those pieces in my car and I could leave them in my trunk, and then if it happens, I can have someone go do that, but I can't have them carry that. Okay, and then it talks about here where the penalty applies. If it's while playing the hole, the penalty is applied at the end of the hole being played. And then in match play, we're going to complete the hole and then I make the adjustment to the match. And then if it's between the play of 2 holes, the penalty is applied as the end of the hole just completed, not the next hole. So if I'm walking from hole 1 to 2 and I realize I have 15 clubs, I'm going to get in stroke play, I'm going to get a 2-stroke penalty on the 1st hole, but nothing on the 2nd. Okay, when we do have excess clubs or we're taking a club out of a play, there's a certain procedure that we want to follow. And we're going to be a little lenient on this in terms of us. But I think the important thing is that when it's done, it's just communicated properly to the group or to the starter or whoever, so that everyone's clear as to what clubs are out of play and what clubs are in play. So again, we need to take immediate action and take that club out. And you can do that by declaring this to our opponent, the match player, the marker, or another player in our group. We can take some other clear action. A lot of times you'll see this, they'll turn the club upside down. They'll put it in the, separate in their cart. Maybe they'll put it in the back basket of the cart, or they'll lay it on the floor. Just, basically saying this is out of play. I don't have any intent to use it. but I don't have any place to put it that's convenient, and I don't want to lose it, type of thing. And then there's a little note here again that if a club is taken out of play as another player's club, that the other player may continue to use the club. So that's like, if I happen to grab someone else's wedge and I had it, Dan was supposed to have it with him, and I realized I had it, I could give it to Dan if he was playing and he could use it, provided that he didn't have 14 clubs already. Okay, and then if we don't take clubs out of play, and we continue to play once we've know about it, then we're going to be disqualified there. So the key thing there is just if we do have it, and we need to get it handled right away. We can't continue to carry it if we know that we have it. And when I say carry it, we just need to make sure that it's identified as out of play. We can continue to carry it in various situations as long as there's a clear action that's we're taking it out of play, but we do need to declare it out of play once we become aware of it.
Hey, Kyle.
Yeah.
Kyle, one note, it talks about that a club taken out of play cannot be used again the rest of the round. And that is true also if a player happens to damage a club and is able to replace it. The player cannot replace it with that club that was taken out of play earlier. The player must find another club. He cannot use that club taken out of play to put back into play to replace the one damaged.
Okay, so let me just make sure I understand. So basically what you're saying is if I bent my putter and I took it out of play, oh, maybe I shouldn't say I bent it. Maybe you were playing with me and you ran over my putter with your cart.
No, I'm saying if you had excess clubs,
Excess.
I took a club out of play.
Gotcha. I can't put that back into play if another club becomes damaged or whatever. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, gotcha. Yep. Yep, that's a good point to add there. So what happens if it's before the round? If it's before the round, then it's best to just leave the club behind, leave it with the starter. Hopefully the starter's, hopefully the starter's not in the market for a new wedge or something like that. Or maybe give it to someone that's the opposite hand so that they're not inclined to steal it. But you can leave it with the starter, all kidding aside, and you can also just put it back in your trunk or whatever. But again, if you want to do the whole thing in terms of deliberately making it out of play, flip it upside down, just make sure that it's apparent that we're not using this club.
Quick question, Ken, on the first tee, can you give it to a parent and let the parent discard it or take it back?
Yeah. You could give it to a parent and have them, take it back to their van or whatever. I mean, probably wouldn't be best for the parent to just carry it with them, because then we have some issues with that club being able to be put back in play if it was, replaced or sorry, if there was another club that was damaged. So it's best to just leave it off the golf course and not have it carried when possible.
The reason I asked that to Craig's comment earlier, that has happened.
Yeah, definitely. And it says here that if a player deliberately brings more than 14 clubs to his or her first teeing area and starts around without leaving the excess clubs behind, this option is not allowed. And the player is going to be penalized in that scenario. So if I know I'm debating between which putter to use or which driver to use, and I don't take it out of play before the round starts, I'm going to be penalized in that scenario. All right, we're going to move on to the golf ball, unless there's any questions about clubs. All right. So for golf balls, a conforming ball must be used. There is a list of conforming balls that is accessible in the Equipment Rules or in the USGA website. This list gets updated frequently throughout the season, typically once a month. And if there are any questions about if a ball is conforming or not, that player should check with the starter slash official in charge before they begin play. Okay, and then there are certain things in terms of if we have one ball rule in effect, there are some additional things. We won't get into that today because I don't think there's too many events that we have one ball rule in effect. I think just I think it's just the men's and women's and the men's GAM and the women's GAM. Or at least that's what it was for last year.
Hey, Kyle, on the one ball, just the thing, a yellow ball and a white ball, even though they're the same make and model, are two different balls.
Correct. Yes, we had that ruling a couple years ago at the senior match play with Randy Lewis. Yep. So if it's the same, a yellow and a white ball are different. So that would be a violation of the one ball rule in that scenario. So we also have, I should mention too, we also have the one ball rule in USGA qualifying as well. So that's something that definitely will be in place for 2022. And then a player may get a conforming ball to play from anyone else, including another player on the course. So, you might have someone that is brand new to golf and they start the first hole and they tee off with the range ball and they don't think that they think that's okay. Or maybe they ran out of balls and the only one they had is the range ball they picked up walking near the range. That player obviously can't use the range ball, but can get a conforming ball from anyone else, whether it's the referee, another player, go to the pro shop. But there are a lot of different ways to get a conforming ball. A ball that has been deliberately altered must not be played. So a player must not make a stroke at a ball whose performance characteristics have been deliberately altered, such as by scuffing or heating the ball. So if I've got a hand warmer in my pocket and I'm putting the ball in there to purposely warm it up so it will go farther in the cold, that's an issue. And if I do that, I'm going to be disqualified. Again, this is key word here is deliberately. There could be times where my ball is heated, but it's not deliberate. It just happens to happen. Or it's just in my pocket and it does get heated, but I wasn't intending to do it. Then I'm going to be off the hook there, provided that we believe that the player didn't do it deliberately. If you have a ball break into pieces while playing the hole, that shot won't count, or that stroke doesn't count, and the ball will need to be played again. So if that happens, that would be, I doubt that will ever happen, but that's the rule if it does.
Hey, Kyle,
Yeah.
I just want to talk a little bit about XL balls and refurbished balls versus practice balls. There's a interpretation 4.2a 1/2 talks about those. Basically, the bottom line is because the GAM has uses a list of conforming golf balls, XL balls and refurbished balls are not going to be considered conforming and cannot be used because we use the conforming ball list. However, balls that are marked as practice, as long as they seem to be, as long as they're listed, the ball itself is listed on the conforming ball list, a practice ball would be considered conforming and would be allowed to be used. And that's explained under 4.2a 1/2 interpretation.
On page 64 here.
Yeah, 64.
Hey, Craig, friend of mine buys these balls, I don't know, I guess they're overruns that the logo is marked out from Carl's. Are those conforming?
I would say yes, Dick, they should be. There's nothing stamped on them otherwise, right? They just like maybe have I've seen a player use a ball, they get these overrun balls and they put a big black circle over the logo.
Yeah, that's the ones I'm talking about.
Yeah, I would say those are conforming. If the ball is listed on a conforming list, yeah, that would be conforming. It's just like a logo, because logo balls would be considered conforming anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, so Craig, what you're saying here is that because we use the list of conforming golf balls as a local rule, those refurbished and X out balls cannot be used,
They are considered non-conforming.
right?
Where does it say that?
Page 64, middle down.
I'm looking at page 64. I think I read it that it says they are conforming.
Well, if you say however, if the committee,
Yeah, read the next thing. However,
Oh, and in our,
yeah, we use a list of conforming balls. We don't let them use the Callaway Hots or whatever some of those crazy balls are. So,
all right, thank you.
but yeah, that's a good point, Craig. I would have, I think you see more the ones that are marked with refurbished than you do the X out nowadays.
yeah,
As you get a lot of people that like to get those, refurbished balls for $20, Pro Vs for $20 that have been in the water and fly like crap. But they feel like they're getting a good deal out of them. So. All right, good point there. So there's a question about a practice ball. So a practice ball is conforming. So if they just have the word practice on it, those are fine. It's essentially what the interpretation says is that it's basically treated as the same as a logo or a slogan or something like that would be printed on the ball in that case. Because a lot of times these, and just to hammer this again, a lot of times these X outs and these refurbished balls, the characteristics have changed. It's not, there's a reason that they're X outs because the ball wasn't made properly, or there's something in the process of it being made that didn't go according to plan.
You find a lot of refurbished balls down here in Florida because of all the water.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's I think I've donated a few to the cause when I play down in Florida. So, all right. What happens if a ball becomes cut or cracked while playing the hole? So a golfer is able to lift it to see if it's cut or cracked. But they need to reasonably believe that it's been cut or cracked. So they can't just do it because it may have been, or they think it might be. They need to have a reason to go down and actually do this. So if they do have a reason, maybe they can see something on the ball, or maybe they hit the cart path really hard or something like that, or made a weird noise or something like that. That would be a sufficient enough reason to look. The player may lift the ball, but the spot of the ball must first be marked, and the ball must not be cleaned unless the ball is on the putting green, which we can clean without restriction there. But we don't need, the player doesn't need to announce it. Previously, under the old rules, they did. Now they don't need to announce it. But again, they need to have a reasonable belief that their ball may be cut or cracked to do this. Okay, and if they don't, or they fail to mark the spot of the ball before lifting it, or they clean it when it's not allowed, the player is going to get a one-stroke penalty in that scenario. Okay, so if they've done everything right, they've marked it, they've lifted it to see if it's cut or cracked. The player may only substitute another ball if if it can be clearly seen that the original ball is cut or cracked and this damage happened during the hole being played, but not if it is only scratched or scraped, or its paint is only damaged or discolored. So you might hit the cart path and have a little scrape on there, but if it's not a cut or the ball's not cracked, that's not something that can be replaced. However, you know, there's nothing in the rules that prohibit a player from substituting the ball if the rule allows it. So if I'm taking relief from the cart path because my ball hit the cart path, I can substitute another ball in at that point. I don't need to put that one that has that scuff mark on it. But if my ball got scuffed up from the cart path, but I wasn't taking relief, that's not going to be enough to justify putting a new ball or substituting a new ball into play. If it is cut or cracked, then we're just going to replace it with another ball. Or we could use the original ball too. It's nothing wrong with that. And then if it's not cracked, then obviously we're going to place the original ball back on the spot where it was.
Question,
Kyle, on the ball replacement, if the damage has occurred on a previous hole, you cannot replace that ball on another hole. It's got to be in the hole that the damage was incurred.
Yes. Yep. Good. Yep. Good point, Marv. There. If it, yeah, it's the damage only on the play of the hole being played. Yep.
if I'm a question, a ball hits cart path, I mark it, I look at it, I say, oh, it's scuffed. So I take out a little piece of sandpaper and fix that up a bit. Am I disqualified?
That's a good question. I don't know if I'm not sure there. I think in that case it probably that probably is not allowed, but I don't know for sure what that sandpaper would do.
Isn't that cleaning?
Yeah, I mean, I probably have used sandpaper in my life maybe once or twice. So yeah, if that's what sandpaper does, then yeah, but I don't know the answer. We can look into that. I think if someone's playing golf and they have sandpaper on them, that would be the likelihood of that happening is probably pretty high, but we can find out about that, or we can get back to you on that one, Doug.
I would think that might be refurbishing.
I would think that would also change the characteristics of the ball. You're fooling around with the dimples.
Yeah, we'll get back to that again. I don't know the answer. The likelihood of that coming up is extremely high, I would imagine, but I could be wrong. So we'll find out about the sandpaper. All right. Any questions? Any other questions about the golf balls, before we move on to the use of equipment here? All right, so rule 4.3 is the use of equipment. It applies to all types of equipment that a player might use during a round, except that the requirement to play with conforming clubs and balls is covered by the previous rules, not by this one. This rule only concerns how equipment is used. It does not limit the equipment that a player may have with him or her during the round. Okay, so again, when we talk about some of these things, it's going to be not necessarily that we have it, it's that we use it. Okay, so we might have certain things that we're not allowed to use, but just having it is not going to give us a penalty, only if we use it. Okay, so within this rule, there are some good concrete examples of things that we are allowed and things that aren't when we're using certain equipment. And the big thing here is that a player may use equipment, except that the player must not create a potential advantage by using equipment other than a club or a ball that artificially eliminates or reduces the need for a skill or a judgment that is essential to the challenge of the game. Okay, so think about like a green reading book or something along those lines. These are some types of things that we're talking about, or a swing aid or something like that. We can also not use equipment in an abnormal way while making a stroke. Abnormal means a way that is fundamentally different than its intended use, and it's not normally recognized as part of playing the game. And then here are, so that it says this rule does not affect the application of any other rule that limits actions a player is allowed to take with a club, a ball, or other equipment, such as setting down a club or another object to help the player in lining up. Here are some common examples of equipment that are allowed and not allowed. Distance and directional information. You're allowed to get information on distance or direction, whether it's from a distance measuring device or a compass. And this is public common information, common knowledge. However, there are certain things that we can't get. We can't measure elevation. So you'll see that, you'll get that question. My rangefinder has slope, can I use it? Can't use it to determine slope, but a lot of the rangefinders will have a button that you can flip on or off. And if you leave it off, then the player is fine to use it. Okay, and then there are certain situations where a device may give you a recommended line of play or a club selection. So there's some apps, screen reading apps, that will actually tell you, like, here's the line you need to hit it on. We can't use that. And then there is a ability to put a local rule in to prohibit the use of distance measuring devices. By default, distance measuring devices that measure distance only are allowed, but you can prohibit them. So for some events, they are prohibited. I believe the Opens now, the Women's Open, the Men's Open, and the Senior Open are prohibited. Although I think they do allow them at qualifying. I think it's just at the national championship where they don't allow it. I think at the qualifying it is allowed. And I'm like 98% sure that's correct. But
yeah, that's correct. They're allowed at local qualifying.
Right. All right. Thanks, Alex. Information on wind and other weather conditions. So you can get any type of weather information, including wind speed, that is available from weather forecast or measuring temperature and humidity. However, you can't measure the wind speed at the course or use an artificial object to get other wind-related information, such as using powder to assess wind direction. If you want to find out which way the wind is blowing, grab some grass and throw it up in the air. Information gathered before or during the round. So you can use information that was gathered before the round, such as playing information from previous rounds, swing tips, or club recommendations. Or you can record for use after the round, playing or physiological information from the round, such as club distance, playing stats, or heart rate. So we talk about this physiological information. We can record that, but we can't use that. So, I can't, if I got an Apple Watch on and I can see my heart rate or whatever kind of watch, and I can see my heart rate, I can't look at that information to gain a potential advantage. So I can't look down and say, oh, my heart rate's like pretty high right now. I need to take some deep breaths and calm myself down. But if that information is recorded and then afterwards I look back and say, oh, on the third hole over that 5-footer, your heart rate was 120. I can use that after the fact, but not during the round. We talk about things that aren't allowed, club recommendations from current distances. So sometimes if you're a certain way, there are apps that will say, oh, this is, you should recommend hit the 7-iron or whatever. And we talked about that physiological information. We can't use that during the round. Audio and video. We can listen to audio or watch video on matters unrelated to the competition being played, such as a news report or background music. But in doing so, consideration must be shown to others. So if I'm playing and Alex is playing or someone is playing country music and I absolutely despise country music and I don't want it being played, I can ask that that they turn it down or turn it off. And that is completely fine and should be acceptable under the rules, or sorry, under really etiquette. But simply listening to music or background music is not a violation. However, if I'm doing it to avoid or eliminate distractions, or to help with my swing tempo, that's not allowed. And I also can't view video showing play of the player or another players during the competition that helps the player in choosing a club or making a stroke. So I don't think that's ever going to come up in our scenario, but if I'm playing on PGA Tour, I can't see what Ricky Fowler did on the 7th hole when I get to the 7th hole to find out what club I should hit. And then if the committee wants, they can put in a local rule prohibiting or restricting the use of audio and video during the round. The GAM does not have that local rule to my knowledge, but we could put it in play for certain events or certain, for certain events or tournaments if we wanted to. I think we just kind of go along the lines of, just making sure that it's not distracting. And typically we only see this in our net competitions or our golf days or things that are a little bit less casual and not your formal Michigan Amateur or something like that. And there definitely is a kind of gray area in terms of listening to music as background music or doing it to eliminate distractions. So, generally speaking, if there's anything that could potentially be construed as eliminating distractions, we're going to have an issue there. So if that's at all something that is being done, then we're going to ask that the video or the music not be played in that scenario.
So if you're refereeing and you see someone walking around playing with earphones on or earbuds or something, you need to say something to them. You need to investigate it and be proactive about it. Is that correct?
Correctly, yeah. So you would want to ask them kind of open-ended questions. Hey, what are you listening to there? And then the smart players will say, "Oh, I'm just listening to music," when they're getting swing advice from their coach. But no, yeah, you should look into it, ask the questions, and find out what they're doing. And if there's any doubt, then you can always ask the players to stop it. So, we have scenarios. This is a different rule, but if someone's looks like they're giving advice to a player, whether they're giving advice or not is important, obviously, but it's also the perception of, whether they're doing it or not. So to avoid any potential confusion, sometimes it's just easier to just say, hey, we just prefer that you not put your headphones in during this event. And unless you can really say with 100% certainty that it's not anything that's prohibited, you need to stop doing it. And most times the players are going to be okay with that. But for golf days, as Dan said in the comments, for other casual events, music is much more normal than it was in the past.
Well, I think the other thing too is there is a senior player that plays with earplugs, not earbuds, but actual earplugs. And if you stop them and ask them, he would tell you that it's to keep out all the distracting noises, which again, you can't do.
Right. Yep.
I do have one other thing. USGA came out recently with the length of the driver being reduced back down to 44 inches, or no, 46.
46. Yep.
From 48. And I understand that's a local rule now, and that we are not going to adopt that at this point in time, so that anyone using a 48-inch driver can still do so. Correct?
I believe that is correct. So there have been two recent local rules put in place since last season. That the driver length being one, and the other one being the limit on green reading devices. Both of those came with recommendations from the USGA to us to not implement them for our events, that they were meant to be for elite, professional, or amateur level golf. like elite, and that for us not to use it. So I believe that I'm 99% certain that we're going to follow the recommendations the USGA gave us to not use them, and we won't be putting those in play.
Okay,
What
thank-
about low USGA qualifiers?
So that's a good question. I believe that I need to look through, but I believe that I think that they're not going to have those in play for the local qualifiers, or maybe one is not, but we will make sure. I don't know if they sent us out their hard card yet for the year. But once we get their hard card, we will make sure, and that'll be available for people. But I believe that even for the qualifying, that they're not going to require that. I think it's one of those things that it's going to be enforced at the championship level, but I could be wrong on that. We'll definitely let everyone know before May 4th or 3rd, whatever that first qualifier is.
Yeah, Kyle, I'm pretty sure the local USGA qualifiers will not have that local rule in effect.
Right. Okay, thanks, Craig. Gloves and gripping agents. We won't read through all these, but there are certain things that are allowed, certain ones that aren't. Stretching devices, any equipment for general stretching other than in making a practice swing, whether it's used for stretching for use in golf, such as a alignment rod placed across the shoulders, or for any purpose unrelated to golf. However, using any type of golf training or swing aid, such as alignment rod or a weighted head cover or a donut, or a non-conforming club to make a practice swing, or in any other way that creates potential advantage by helping the player in preparing for making a stroke, is not allowed. So I can't grab out my donut club to, right before my shot. Now, granted, this is during the round, so before the round starts, before I hit my tee shot, that's fine. But during the round, I can't do that. That is not allowed. Okay, and then in terms of clubs and everything, and all these types of equipment, balls, etc., one kind of general rule of thumb that we use, or that we communicate, that you guys can communicate to the players as well, is that if there's any doubt, the player needs to come and ask and get confirmation. And then on our end, if there's anything that's brought to our attention, we're going to investigate it, but we're not going to sit there and on the first tee check everyone's clubs and just have them show us their golf balls and make sure they're on the conforming list. That's something that if the player asks us, we'll look into, or if it's brought to our attention, we'll address, but we're not actively going out and asking for that information from every player that competes. The last thing I wanted to talk about under this is, if I can find it here. So green reading materials. There is a source. So if you go to on the USGA website, Playing Rules of Golf Home, there's a section here for green reading materials. If you want to learn some more information about what is allowed, what isn't, there are some restrictions on what is allowed to be in terms of scale, what is allowed to be written in there, who is allowed to write it. There are some clarification or some interpretations as well in here. And then last thing I wanted to bring to your attention again, if there's any ever question about if it's conforming or not, there is this green reading template. So Alex, I don't know if you can talk and show everyone so that your picture comes up to see. You can show everyone what this little template looks like that we'll have with us to be able to check any green book to make sure it conforms.
Hey, Kyle, the carts down here had on the little video screen had the Golf Logic green reading stuff. That can be turned on and off. So if we're at a tournament where there is the GPS stuff, we ought to make sure that they turn off the golf logic.
Yes, yep, good point there. Yeah, there are certain things in certain apps that are not compliant. Alex, are you there? Maybe there's a meeting at the office going on right now, so he might be in that. But basically this, it's a clear plastic template that we have that we can check any green book to make sure that it fits in the appropriate size and scale. So we'll have that at every event that we have if there are any questions.
Well, maybe we should add that the first tee so we can measure them if there's any issue for the starter.
Yeah, yep, definitely. We will have, right now we have 4 of them. And if we have double T start, we have 3 events going on, that will be an issue, but we'll see if we can get some more. But we'll definitely have one available to check if people do have questions. And then the last thing I'll say in terms of these green rated materials and distance measuring devices and things like that. For those of you that use the GAM mobile app, you'll probably have seen or at least seen something. There is some GPS and advanced green reading materials that are available for additional purchase through the GAM mobile app. The basic GPS is included, but everything that's in the GAM mobile app in terms of green reading, heat maps, things like that, that is all 100% rules compliant. And that was really launched in early August last year. So we didn't see a ton of people using it out in our championships, but I'm guessing this year there might be a lot more people using it. So if they are using anything with any app within or any features within the GAM mobile app, that's 100% rules compliant. The USGA worked with the company that they partnered with to make sure that all those features are 100% rules compliant. All right. A couple things. There may be. We talked. Another thing that is in this section is transportation. So on the GAM's hard card, there is a comment or a section here about transportation. So unless otherwise permitted by the committee, players and caddies shall not use motorized carts. Penalty is general penalty for each hole where there's a breach. We may also, in certain cases, limit the carts to just players as opposed to caddies, but that would have to be put on the rule sheet in order to be enforced. And then we also, in certain cases, obviously we have events that are riding events. So for those, we would have that riding is okay, transportation is allowed, but we still may prohibit certain people, caddies, or really spectators for a lot of our riding events. We don't have caddies for our riding events, but so there are some things that we can put in place for transportation. You may see other rules in terms of who is not allowed. Like I said, we might prohibit caddies or may say only one person can ride at a time, or etc. So for any riding event, just probably make sure that we understand who is and who is not allowed to ride in carts, so we know that going into the competition. And you can check with the rover or the official in charge to find out exactly if there's going to be any specific restrictions on who can ride in the carts. You can have a medical exception. So if you've worked the state finals before, Michigan high school state finals, you'll typically see, one player or at least one player in a cart. They'll have a medically approved reason to use the cart. You might find that for a caddy in the Michigan Amateur. We've done that before where the caddy has been approved to use the cart. And again, that will be something that will be communicated out by the official in charge or the rover, so that everyone's aware of that player or that group that where there is a medical exception. All right, in all these scenarios, when we're dealing with a breach of Rule 4.3, the first act is going to be a general penalty, and then anyone beyond that is going to be disqualification. So that could be, it could be the same thing, using a rangefinder that's not approved or using slope on a rangefinder twice, that would be disqualification, but it could also mean, using a rangefinder that's not, or using a rangefinder that allows slope. And that for the first one, which you get your general penalty, and the next one could be riding in a cart or using something else where you're not allowed to. And that would still be disqualification in that place, in that scenario. All right, any questions on Rule 4 before we move on to 5? All right. So Rule 5, playing the round. Purpose statement here. Rule 5 covers how to play a round, such as where and when a player may practice on the course, before, during a round, when a round starts and when it ends, and what happens when play has to stop or resume. So players are expected to start each round on time and play continuously at a prompt pace during each hole until the round is completed. When it is the player's turn to play, it is recommended that he or she makes a stroke in no more than 40 seconds, and usually more quickly than that. Okay, so this is in the rules now, there is a actual recommendation for the allotted time to take for a stroke. Before, that wasn't necessarily the case, but now there is an actual recommendation. Again, it's up to the committee to put in a pace of play policy that would enforce this, but that is the recommendation. Recommend. All right, so what is a round? A round is 18 or fewer holes played in the order set by the committee. So if we have a 18-hole event, it's going to be 18 holes. We may have a 12-hole event. Those of you who helped out at our 14 and under match play we do at Woodside and Lansing area, that our first round is 12 holes. And that's because it's a 12-hole golf course. So whatever we define as the round, it can be, whether it's 9, 18, it can't be more, but it can be 18 or fewer. If a round ends in a tie, and play will go on until there's a winner, will be a playoff and stroke play. This is going to be a new round. So when we talked about some of the things about damaged club, and we talk about advice and other types of things that talk about restrictions during the round, if we have a playoff and stroke play, that's a new round. So we need to keep this in mind, that there are certain things that can be done when a new round starts, and certain things that are required to be done, like a damaged club that would not be allowed to be used going forward in that playoff. In match play, it's just going to be extended one hole at a time, provided that we have in the competition that the match won't end in a tie. And then this is going to be a continuation of the same round, not a new round. So we'll have different sets of rules for that. So a good example of this is the advice rule. Players can't get advice from a person other than their caddy or their partner or their partner's caddy. And in this case here, if we're in match play, we go on to the next hole to continue the match, we're not going to be able to get advice from spectator. But in stroke play, we might finish our round, and before the stroke play playoff starts, mom or dad might come and say, hey, you're coming in, your alignment's a little off, like move your left foot forward a little bit, and that's fine, because it's between rounds, and advice is allowed between the rounds. All right, and then the last thing here, when a rule refers to actions taken during a round, that does not include while play is stopped under Rule 5.7a, unless the rule says otherwise. Okay, so another example with the advice thing during, if there's a rain delay, that round is It's not during the round, now the round's suspended, so players can get advice during a rain delay in the clubhouse or whatever. They can talk about what club they hit on certain holes. There's no issue with that while the play is suspended. All right, practicing with an S on the course before or between rounds. Practicing on the course means playing the ball or testing the surface of the putting green on any hole by rolling or rubbing the surface. And the limitations on practice on the course before or between rounds only apply to the player, not the player's caddy. And so, important thing to understand: if a caddy goes out and watches golf or goes out in the course before, there's nothing in the rules that penalize a player or the player for that. It can be severely frowned upon, and the caddy may be asked to not come back if they do that. But there's nothing in the rules per se that prohibit that. In match play, a player may practice on the course before a round or between the rounds, so no restrictions there. However, in stroke play, on the day of the competition, a player must not practice before the round, except on the practice putting greens or chipping areas near his or her first tee area, and any practice area that's defined by the committee. So the range, chipping area, whatever we define as practice area. However, a player may practice on the course after completing play of his or her final round, except if there's a local rule that's put in place, which the GAM has. The GAM prohibits play on the competition course in stroke play after the round has been completed. So if I'm playing in a 2-day tournament, I can't go out and play in the afternoon with my dad or with my kid on that same competition course if it's a stroke play competition. In match play, it's not a problem. But again, this is a local rule that we put in play. It's on our hard card. So under the hard card, practice spelled the right way. We prohibit that. However, that doesn't mean that for certain events we might not want to allow it. So if there was an event, maybe like the Mid-Am or something like that, where players were going to play a practice round on the next course upcoming, we could allow that if we wanted to, but that would need to be put in play specifically for a specific event, because by our hard card, we do not allow practice between rounds in stroke play competition. If I do it the first time, I'm going to get general penalty, and then if I do it a second time, then I'm going to be disqualified. When a round starts, so a player's round starts when the player makes a stroke to start his or her first hole. The player must start at and not before his or her starting time. So I think we've all, or most of us have heard this, but when we set a time, when the committee sets a tee time, and it's 9 o'clock, as this example says here, that means that we need to be started and ready to go, ready to play at 9 o'clock and 0 seconds, not 9 o'clock and 43 seconds or 1 minute. It's 9 a.m. exactly. And we'll have a clock on the first tee that will be the official time, or if there's not a clock, it'll be the cell phone of the starter or the official in charge. Typically those are going to be the same time, but that'll be the official time. And again, they need to be ready to play at exactly their time, not shortly after. If we do have a delay, then obviously that's going to impact that starting time. It could be maybe the player shows up, if they have a 9 o'clock tee time, they show up at the tee at 9:02. But when they get there, the fairway on the first hole is occupied and the players can't tee off. In that scenario there, the player would not be penalized because they can't play. So there are some unique situations where the player may get off the hook. for being late. But if the fairway's clear and ready to play and they're not there exactly on time, then they're going to be penalized in one or two ways. If they get there within 5 minutes, then they're just going to get the general penalty for the first hole. So they'll either lose the hole in match play or 2 strokes in stroke play. And if it's more than 5 minutes later, then they're going to be disqualified. And then there are, so I think in the interpretations or the official guidebook, there is some language on what it means to be ready to play. So that means essentially on the tee, on the starting area with a club in hand, and not just there without if their caddy or their bag isn't there, they're not ready. They need to have a club in hand and be ready to play.
Hey, Kyle,
Yeah,
club and a ball.
club and a ball. Yep. Thank you for that. Yep, club and a ball. So yeah, 5.3a/3 on page 78 talks about the meaning of ready to play. And it, again, like John said, club and a ball or ball and a club, they need to be there and ready to go. That's a good interpretation to read there. 5.3a/3 on page 78. Another good interpretation is 5.3a/1. You see page 77 there. This talks about some exceptional circumstances where a player is not going to get a penalty for being late. It also talks about situations that would not be excused. So the most common one we get is a player is late because they ran into traffic or they had a flat tire or something like that. Both of those are examples that would not be approved and would not be exceptional circumstances, and the player is going to be penalized under the rules when that situation comes up. But some of the other ones, they are providing medical assistance to someone, or they need to respond to a police report or something like that. That's probably the most specific one. There's another one in here about a fire alarm at the hotel. Those are scenarios where the player would not get a penalty. And we all can't be Rory McIlroy and have a police escort from waking up late at our alarm from the hotel to Medina for the Ryder Cup. So sometimes player is gonna not show up and not be there. The other thing too, just briefly mention when we're talking about starting, again, this is the player's responsibility. So we communicate with them multiple times what their tee time is. It's available on the website, and so they get all this information in advance, and we're not there to babysit the players and make sure that they're on time. If the player, for those of you that are starting, if a player is not there, it's good to let everyone know or let the official in charge know that the player is not there, but don't wait on your instructions to the rest of the group that is there just because a player is late. Go ahead and go through your spiel that you give on the tee, and then when that person gets there, they'll get the information that is covered, or if they miss something, that's their own fault. But again, we don't want to bend over backwards for these people that show up late. If we can help them get them to their tee time on time, that's great. But we shouldn't be going out of our way to accommodate the players that are late. We should make sure we're doing right by the players that are there on time.
Kyle, thanks for that specific advice for our starters. You're going to have somebody on the radio looking for a player on the practice green or going to the wrong tee on a 2-tee start, but you've got to start your speech on time.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point, Dan. A lot of times it's just a player going to the wrong tee. So it's always important when you're starting too that you make sure that you have people that are on the right tee. a lot of time you'll just make sure when you got people coming up, you'll just say, you're in the 1002 group, and just make sure they're on and off number 1 or number 10, just to make sure they're on the right side, because a lot of times they just go to the wrong side and they don't know better. So good point to bring up there, Dan. All right, so when a round ends, pretty straightforward. In match play, when the result of the match is decided, or in stroke play, when the player holds out at the final hole, including a correction of mistake that will be mentioned in some other rules down the road. And then there are going to be some specific rules when a round starts and ends in other forms of stroke play and 4-ball. Those are covered in these rules mentioned here. So, depending on what type of play it is, when a side starts, if it's the partner or the player, it just depends on the format in that case. But what we talked about was just really for individual stroke play or match play. All right, so in groups, the committee is in charge of putting the groups together, setting the groups for the day. And the players in match play, they need to play each other in the same hole, the same group. And then during stroke play, the players must remain in the same group unless the committee approves a change, either before or after it happens. So key point there, either before or after it happens. So, sometimes we'll roll up and we might have a foursome, and they just think that, oh, this would be better if we break up into twosomes, and they just do it on their own. At that point, the committee will need to rule if that breakup was approved or not. And then if we say, well, why did you do that? And there's no real reason or anything like that, then that group would be disqualified for that if that happened. Oddly enough, that probably, I don't know if it happens every year, but we get that question every year, like, hey, can we break up? Or because we have a group that's slowing down, or we have maybe two twosomes that are back to back and they want to combine together to be a foursome because they're waiting on every shot, etc. These are things that the committee would need to approve in order for them to happen or to not be penalized. Practicing during a round or while play is stopped, and no practice strokes while playing the hole. There are a couple of things though that aren't practice strokes. So a practice swing made with no intent to strike the ball, it's not a stroke. If we're walking by the driving range and we're hitting a ball back to the practice area, or if we're hitting the ball to another player, maybe they hit the wrong ball or something like that, or provisional, and we can hit it to them if they're that distance, but only if it's done solely as a courtesy. And then strokes made by a player in playing out a hole whose result has already been decided, those are not practice strokes. So that's typically match play or something like that. You'll see where that comes into play. A player may concede the hole but want to hit a few practice shots or something like that, a few putts, etc. Those are not practice strokes. Between the two holes, a player must not make a practice stroke, with the exception that a player is allowed to practice putting or chipping on the practice putting green or on the putting green of the hole just completed, or any practice putting green or any practice green. And they could also do this on the teeing area of the next hole. So if I get done playing the hole and I finish the hole and I wanted to hit a few putts or chips, I can do that by the rules. However, we strongly discourage that because of pace of play primarily, but there's nothing there's no rule prohibiting it. We could put a local rule in prohibiting that if we wanted to, but as a current states, we do not have that local rule in place. And then there is an exception there. Practice strokes must not be made from the bunker, and then again, must not unreasonably delay play. So if the group is on the clock and they want to do that and hit a bunch of practice strokes, we're going to stop that for sure from happening. But if they aren't slowing up play behind them, and they're going to be waiting on the next hole when they get to the tee. If they want to hit a few strokes after they're done playing, that's not a problem. But again, we don't encourage it. And I think if you saw that in a non-match play situation, you probably just want to say, we want to tell people, hey, we prefer that you not do that, so that you can get to the next hole and keep pace of play moving.
Kyle, question.
Mhm.
This one, I don't know, just read it and I was kind of surprised. So if some of these courses, I'm thinking of one in particular, I come up on the tee, I've completed the hole, and the practice green for putting happens to be just behind that tee. While I'm waiting to tee off during the round, then I can go over, take my putter and a few balls and go over to the practice green and kind of tune up my stroke.
I believe so, as long as you're not delaying play. Let me just look at rule 13.1E to just make sure that that's correct, but
Yeah, Doug, that's correct. It says any practice green, you can practice your putting
Yeah.
in.
Wow.
yeah, just. So but again, we don't see this happen. And honestly, I bet you if you asked if we surveyed 100 rules officials and 100 players, I bet you 90 of them would say in both categories that practice is not allowed between play and stroke play. Because for a lot of places, a lot of events, it's not. While play is suspended or otherwise stopped, a player must not practice except as allowed in Rule 5.5B or anywhere outside the course and anywhere in the course that the committee allows. So in general, if we suspend play for dangerous situation, that also includes any practice privileges out at the facility. So if we suspend for lightning, we are definitely not, allowing players to practice on the practice facilities. With that being said, play may be suspended, and after the lightning is passed, we may, in certain situations, allow them a little bit of time to warm up or hit practice putts on the green. That's okay, but there are certain times where we're going to close practice facilities, and until we've given kind of the all clear, that generally those areas will be closed. If a match was stopped by agreement of the players and will not be resumed the same day, the players may practice in the course without restriction before the match is resumed. Not really. That would be something more if you were just playing a friendly match amongst yourselves at the course and quit because of rain or thunderstorms, and then later in the afternoon you wanted to play a couple holes. Not a problem there. If we do have a breach of this rule and we practice when we're not supposed to, while either during the round or while play is stopped, we're going to have a general penalty applied there. And then it says if the breach happens between the two holes, the penalty is going to apply to the next hole. All right, Rule 5.6, unreasonable delay or prompt pace of play. A player must not unreasonably delay play, either when playing a hole or between two holes. So on page 83 in your official's guide, at 5.6A/1, it talks about what it means to, just pull it up here, unreasonable. It gives some examples of things that are reasonable and things that are unreasonable. So I would, definitely read through that, but just, some cliff notes. I mean, stopping at the clubhouse to get food or go to the bathroom, that's obviously reasonable action. Some things that aren't reasonable, stopping at the clubhouse and sitting down and having a 5-course meal and then going out and playing after that. That wouldn't be allowed unless the committee allows it. If you've played in other parts of the country, specifically like over in Asia, that actually is common to have and sit down for lunch between your nines. But here for our events, that would not be allowed. Player may be allowed a short delay for certain reasons if they are getting help from a referee or a committee. So obviously, if they're waiting on a ruling, we're not going to penalize them for that. And we're going to take that ruling time into consideration if we are applying any pace of play penalties. The player won't be held responsible for that. A player could become injured or ill. They get 15 minutes, it talks about there. So an example of that, I think in the 2016 U.S. Women's Amateur, I think it was a 36-hole day they were playing, and it was mid 90s in the Philadelphia area. One of the players had some got just overheated, and so they paused for up to 15 minutes to allow her to get back down to normal levels and not have any worries of heat exhaustion or anything like that. So that could happen. In that case, you might have groups play through each other if it's something serious, but that is allowed. And there could be other things. We had and this is kind of an extreme example, but a couple of years ago there was reports of gunshots near a golf course where we had an event at, and there was a pause for certain groups near that area where there was reported gunshots. That would be a good reason to delay, and players aren't going to be penalized for that. And then generally speaking, depending on the policy, because this is can be covered in pace of play policy, but in general, for breach of this rule, the first breach is going to be 1 penalty stroke. The second breach is going to be general penalty, and the third breach will be disqualification. But again, some of these things are going to be handled under pace of play policy and not necessarily under this rule, because the pace of play policy will be put together and kind of override some of these or deal with some of these situations if they do come up. So we talk about what it's meant to be playing at a prompt pace. The rules are specific about what that means. There is some wording here. I won't read through all of it, but really that the players, this is more. Some of these things are for just casual play. Obviously, players are encouraged to allow faster groups to play through. Players aren't going to let any groups play through in GAM tournaments. That's going to be something that if it does happen, the committee will orchestrate that. But in terms of playing at a prompt pace, some recommendations, we talked about this 40 seconds, recommended the player make a stroke in no more than 40 seconds after he or she is able to play without interference or distraction. And we also encourage players to play quote unquote ready golf. So what that means is when it's not their turn to play, they can do things to get ready for when it is their turn to play. They can get their distances. They can figure out which way the wind direction is going. There's nothing more frustrating than watching or timing a group, and then watching a player finish, and then the next player, as soon as they're done hitting, they start doing all the stuff they could have done while the other player was getting ready to hit or while they were hitting. So there's a lot of things you can do while other people are hitting. And then when it's your turn to play, you're ready to go, and you step into your shot, you do your pre-shot routine, and you execute. So that is an education thing, definitely for the younger players that haven't been playing as long. They need to learn that, but it's something that we can definitely talk to players after the round about in terms of improving their habits and getting better and being able to play faster. A lot of times too, we can, if we do put players on the clock or we give them a warning card, they'll start, maybe they won't necessarily play or hit their shot faster. They might take 40 seconds, but they might run from point A to point B or hustle. So there are certain things that we can do to help with that and encourage people to make up time in areas that might not be when they're actually getting ready to hit their stroke. And then the last thing here I think is important. It just says that, and this was in the purpose statement, but it's important again to say the player should usually be able to play more quickly than that 40 seconds and is encouraged to do so. So 40 seconds is the max, right? That we're looking at. Now, obviously, that we do when we are timing the players, we do allow typically the person that's first to play is going to get a little bit more time than others, just because they don't have as much. They don't have that extra time to do those things that the other players do. So they're generally given a little bit extra time when we are timing players. Playing on a turn to help pace of play can do that in both stroke and match play. Really, the players need to agree in match play. So you might have the most common example is the play. There's a bathroom between the play of two holes, and the players say, "Oh, I'm going to go to the bathroom." You can go ahead and hit first if you want, and if the players agree to that, then that's fine. That's not something that if you're the referee, it probably depending on the type of match and the scenario, if the players are okay with it, that's fine. But there might be some times where you may want to have the players wait and play in the proper order. But there is a caveat in the rules that do allow players to play out of turn, but only to save time. And then in stroke play, honor or not honor, but the order of play is really kind of irrelevant. It's just play ready golf, but we want to be safe and responsible in this, and want to make sure that everyone knows that we want to be playing ready golf and don't necessarily need to wait to tee off in the right order or play. It's just whoever's ready and it's safe and it's clear to play and we're all communicating, and let's do that. Pace of play policy. Again, we have a pace of play policy that you'll get a sheet on when you're working events that covers kind of how it works, what the policy is, what we do when players are overtime. But the key thing with the pace of play, and we won't go into all these details, is we could talk about a month about pace of play. But the key thing with pace of play is to really just communicate to your rover, to the official in charge, what's going on, how far behind they are, what things you've noticed, so that we can address it right away. Because if we find out that a group is behind and they're on their 15th hole, well, by then it's kind of too late. So we want to find out as early as we can and then be able to address it as quickly as possible, because it can cause a backup and create a bad experience for a lot of people following behind. All right, 5.7, stopping and resuming play. So if a play is suspended by the committee, all players must stop play. But there are some situations where they may have an option to continue just for a short period of time before they need to stop. So depending on if it's stopped for lightning or dangerous situation, or if it's stopped for darkness, those are going to be slightly different scenarios. But if the players stop play by agreement in match play, they can do so, except that they can't do it if it delays the competition. So in our match play events, this is something that's going to be handled by us. We're going to determine when play is stopped and when it's not. However, if two players do think that they want to stop play, maybe it's dark or something like that, that's something that they do have the right to ask. But ultimately, the committee would be the group that would decide in our events. What you do at your course and you play your own fun games, that's completely different. But for our events, we're going to be controlling that. However, there is an exception. if a player wants to stop play because of lightning, they may. And they can do so even if the committee doesn't suspend play. But if they do that, they need to report it to the committee right away. So if they feel like we're not watching radar close enough, or they see something in the sky that feels like, hey, I'm going to get off because this is not safe, that's the player's prerogative to do that. Hopefully we never get to the point where that's the case. Usually we're trying to get off the golf course well in advance, so that we avoid those situations. So there's two types of suspensions, immediate suspension or dangerous, imminent danger. That is going to be signified by one long air horn blast. And then we're going to work, we'll be communicating on the radio when this is going to happen. We'll set a countdown time. There'll be people in place to blow horns in certain areas. Once you've done a few of these, you kind of understand how it works. But if it is a dangerous situation there, we are going to blow one long air horn blast, and the players must stop playing once this is signaled out. The other scenario is just a darkness, or maybe the course is unplayable. At that point, we're going to do 3 short air horn blast to signify this. And at that point, there are a couple options for the players. If they're between 2 holes, they need to stop play. They can't begin or make a stroke to begin another hole. If the players are playing the hole, any player that has started the hole, or anyone in the group, may continue playing that hole. But they need to decide what they're going to do in no more than 2 minutes. So a common example of this you might see on the PGA Tour. You might see if there's delays and they're getting close to darkness. They might let one player in the group play out really quick on the green and run to the next tee and hit a tee shot, so that the group can finish that hole. Because once the one player in the group has hit the tee shot on the hole, that entire group was able to finish that hole if play had been suspended after they had started the play of that next hole. Okay, but any of the players at that point, can choose what they want to do. Once the horn's been sounded, if I want to keep playing, I can do that. And if Craig wants to stop because he has a hard time seeing the greens when it's dark out, then he can stop. However, it is a little different in match play, and that if the opponent stops, the player must also stop play. And so there needs to be some kind of mutual agreement in match play as to what to do if we run into that situation. If a player does play when they're not supposed to, so if we blow an air horn,
Now,
yeah.
the other thing about stroke play is that the player who wants to continue playing and the other guy doesn't, the marker has to go along with him. So if you're a referee or on a trouble hole, you got to make sure, communicate that to the group so they all understand what their responsibilities are.
Correct. Yes. Yeah. You're right. We need to have someone be with that group to make sure that these strokes are counted. So whether that's the marker person keeping their scorecard or a trouble hole official, someone needs to keep an eye on them. Good point there, Lee. But if a player does play a stroke when they're not supposed to, that there is a hefty disqualification penalty there. However, the committee can override that if they feel like there was a reasonable explanation as to why they stopped or they continued play. So we might blow a good example. We might blow the air horn in a couple places, and maybe the very, very corner of the golf course didn't hear it. And by the time we get out there, they're still playing. We tell them, hey, we blew the air horn. And if they say, oh, we never heard it, then we're not going to disqualify the player, even though they played shots after we blew the air horn for a dangerous situation. And then again, when we resume play, so getting into when we resume play now, we're going to blow 2 air horn blasts to resume play. And then when we do that, where they resume, they're going to resume where they left off. So whether that's in the middle of the hole, on the next hole, in the green, in the penalty area, wherever, they're going to resume there. And then the important thing is when they are resuming play, that the players are going to be allowed to place their ball where it was, or if they don't know the exact spot, or maybe it was a mark that they put down was moved, they're going to estimate it and place it on that spot where they think they are. And if the player didn't mark their ball, they just left it out there, they can pick up the ball and clean it, put a new one down, whatever they want to do before play is resumed. That's kind of what this talks about here, is when the player can lift it, they don't have to. Typically, they'll put a bunch of tees down and they'll take their ball with them. If they leave the ball, sometimes the maintenance team or the GAM interns will take their Pro V1s and won't give it back to them. I'm just kidding about the interns. Hopefully they won't do that. But if the ball's not there and they left it there, they can put another ball in play, not a problem. And then there's a couple scenarios here. If the lie of the ball is altered, the player must replace that ball, or another ball is required if the lie ball is altered and after the ball was lifted and before the ball is replaced. The original ball or another ball must be replaced in the original spot. And then if the lie or other conditions affecting the stroke were worsened during the time, there's a different rule that will apply to that. And depending on what happened, whether it was natural or non-natural, there'll be certain relief policies for that. But generally speaking, when we do suspend play, it's going to be for a dangerous situation. And we're going to do everything we can to get the players back out there as quickly as they can, but in a safe manner. And when we do get back out and started, we'll either blow an air horn or we'll communicate to the players when they get back out there, go ahead and start when it's safe and clear to play. We might not always blow an air horn in those cases. But when they do get out there, they're going to be able to basically place the ball where it was, or if they didn't know the exact spot, estimate it and place it there. This just talks about here, again, if a ball marker was moved, they're just going to put it back to where it was and then play on. And if we don't know the exact spot, we're going to estimate it. Same concept here. All right, any questions on Rule 5? Okay. Craig, do you want me to start Rule 6 or do you want me to do a quiz?
No reason to start Rule 6. Why don't we do a quick quiz?
Okay. I missed last week's session because we had some things going on with tournament registration opening, but when you're doing these, are you letting them off the hook and taking easy quizzes, or are we taking hard ones?
We've been doing 10-question basic quizzes up to this point.
Basic?
Yeah, you may want to step that up to intermediate now.
Okay. All right. If I can get it to work. There we go. All right. A player concedes a hole and learns that he or she was to get a handicap stroke on the hole and request a ruling. The committee should revoke the concession. True or false?
False.
False.
Okay. Yep, once the concession's made, it's made and can't be reversed. In match play during search for a ball of A, B kicks a ball in deep rough that is identified as the ball of A. B replaces the ball. What is the ruling? There's no penalty. B gets the penalty of 1 stroke, and only B may replace the ball of A. Or B gets the penalty of 1 stroke, and either A or B may replace the ball.
No penalty.
No penalty.
Right, because we're searching for the ball, right?
Correct.
If we weren't searching, if we
And
weren't
the player
searching,
that moves it can always replace it.
correct, yep. And if we weren't searching for it and they kicked it in match play, then we're gonna have a 1 stroke penalty in that case. A weird example of when you have a 1 stroke penalty in match play. Doesn't happen often. The player's ball in motion after a stroke in the putting green is deliberately deflected by a person attending the flagstick. The player must not play the ball from where the ball came to rest. True or false?
False.
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 Sounds
Deliberately.
right.
Must not. I know.
I think what they're saying is that is the stroke, do we play it as it lies, or is the stroke canceled and we need to replay it?
Yeah.
Deliberate deflection, it should be canceled, no?
I believe so, yep.
Hmm.
So I think we got the right answer there.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, sorry, no. It should
No.
be
Oh,
true.
Could be
true, true,
Correct.
true,
Yep.
true.
All right, practice. We just talked about this. Which is incorrect regarding practice? In match play, a player may practice on the course before his or her match begins.
That's
That's okay.
That's okay.
Between the play of 2 holes, a player may practice putting or chipping on or near any practice green and the putting green of the hole just completed.
That's okay.
That seems good.
That's okay.
Well, the next one better be right then. The committee, or better be incorrect. The committee may not adopt a local rule prohibiting, restricting, or allowing practice on the course before or between rounds in either form of play.
Yeah, that's wrong.
that's wrong.
That's it.
That's wrong.
So we can prohibit practice between stroke play. So that's incorrect. Which is correct regarding the unreasonable delay of play? Man, we're just hitting all these things we talked about today. It's nice. A player must not unreasonably delay play when playing a hole or between holes.
Yes.
That sounds right. When a player unreasonably delays play between hole, the penalty applies to the last hole.
No.
No.
That's wrong.
The next hole.
The next hole.
And the penalty for a breach of this rule is disqualification.
No.
So,
Right. In 4-ball match play, not during search, a player by mistake lifted an opponent's ball in a penalty area without authority. What is the ruling? There's no penalty. The player gets a 1-stroke penalty, but the partner is not penalized. The player and his or her partner each get a 1-stroke penalty.
I'd say no penalty.
it's a 1 stroke, but is it for one or for both?
Yeah, it's 1 stroke.
Yeah. I'm guessing.
Must
it's
be B.
both.
I think it's B.
B. All right.
Because 4 balls are in play. So that means each player is playing his own ball. So it's the player.
Okay.
Hmm.
But the other thing it says in here is, maybe this isn't important, but it says a player by mistake lifts the ball.
Yes.
So does intent matter in this case?
No penalty.
No, in match play, intent doesn't matter.
Correct. Yep. All right. Enforce a match play with side AB. A, whose turn it is to play, plays from outside the teen area. The opponents immediately require the side to cancel the stroke, so play the stroke so played and play correctly from within the teen area. What is the ruling? A must play the next stroke. B must play the next stroke. Either A or B may play the next stroke.
A.
A.
Mhm.
So the rule of thumb is there's no penalty in this case here. They can recall the stroke because it's match play, which we'll learn about next week. But in this case here, it's not going to impact who's playing. The penalty strokes don't impact who is playing.
Correct.
When we talk about foursome or alternate shot. All right, and 4-ball stroke play with side AB. A picks up while B completes the hole. The marker attributes the score for the hole to A and records no score for B. The better ball score is correct. The scorecard is certified and returned to the committee. What is the ruling? The committee should accept without penalty the scorecard is returned since the better ball score of the side was correct. The committee should correct the error by entering the correct score into the proper box of the scorecard and waive the disqualification penalty. The committee must disqualify the side since there was no score recorded for B whose score was to count.
C.
Mhm.
Yep. So at when we do have our 4-ball events, it's very important that, and the rules require that the score is recorded to the person who made the score, and it's properly attributed. If it's not, and that's an issue. So we need to have, if John makes a 4 and him and I are on the team, it needs to go under John's name, not mine. Or just not in the team score. It needs to be specifically identified to the golfer. In stroke play, A plays the ball of B that was lying in the general area, not in the sand, and the lie of B's ball is altered, which is correct. If B knows that the original lie was altered, but does not know what the lie was, B must estimate the original lie and applying the altered lie rule. B must replace the ball by placing it on the nearest spot, not near the hole, with the lie most similar to the original lie in the same area of the course as that spot. If B does not know what the original lie was, he or she is not allowed relief under the altered lie rule.
It's A.
It's A.
Why is it A for those of you that answered it?
Why? He gets to estimate
Yeah.
the spot. If he doesn't know it, he puts it where he thinks it was, estimating it.
Right. Okay. In stroke play, by mistake, A plays B's ball in play, and as a result, B plays A's ball in play. What is the ruling? Only A gets the penalty, general penalty. Only B gets the general penalty. Both A and B get the general penalty.
A, because he hit first.
Both of
A.
They both get it.
Both.
Yeah, they both get it. If it was match play, then the penalty goes to the first idiot who hits it first,
Right.
Lost a hole.
Yeah.
or the shortest player.
Yeah.
So
Lost a
sometimes-
hole.
Right. Yeah. So sometimes it pays to hit the long ball. Just don't hit the wrong ball. Just hit the long LONG ball. All right, let's see how we did here. All right, 10 out of 10.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think we talked through the majority of these when we took them. Are there any specific ones that anyone had questions about that we want to talk through more about why the answer was the way it was? Mike over?
I'm always confused by number 9, but
Yeah, that one I didn't
I know it, I've taken it, and then I forget about it, but I don't know why it couldn't be B instead of A. Other than that, I'm usually good to go for a year or two.
So A plays the ball B that was lying in the general area, not in sand, and the lie of B's ball is altered. B knows the original lie was altered, but does not know what the lie was. B must estimate.
I don't know why the answer B could not be correct, but
I think it's because it said the closest spot, and I think it's 1 club length with the altered lie rule. Is that
okay.
right?
I think you're right, Liz. There's a limitation to being within 1 club length.
Yeah, I think so.
And it didn't mention that, so you gotta, it's kind of like a goofy answer.
Yeah, I'm always thinking of the other rule where 2 balls are close together and you pick the 1 ball up and then the lie is altered after the first player hits his ball, and then you go to the spot closest to where your lie was originally, the original lie. That's why it was confusing. But
I think that's the same rule though. In that scenario, I think you're allowed to be within 1 club length, right? Is that what we're saying?
I thought you had to, if 2 balls are close together, or 1 ball's interfering with the other ball, and the player A picks his ball up so player B can hit, and player B takes a big divot, I always thought player A replaces his ball as close as possible to get the same lie as what he had before. I didn't know it was a full club length. Am I right, Craig?
Well, you're right, except if you look at 14.2D, it says the spot, you're limited to being within 1 club length of the original estimated.
Yeah, but it also says nearest spot.
Yes, that's what I'm saying, nearest. You're limited, but I always thought it was the nearest spot.
Where do you see near?
Yeah, it says so on page 194. It says
Yeah, it's right in the statement.
yeah, when the ball was anywhere. So I think it's important here to say anywhere except in sand. That's also so when a ball is anywhere except in sand, the player must replace the ball by placing it on the nearest spot with the lie most similar to its original lie. That is, here's the thing, within 1 club length from its original spot, which if not known must be estimated, not near the hole and in the same area of the course. So we do have that 1 club length window in which to do it. I think the one example that we think about the nearest most similar thing is if it is in the bunker. So sometimes we might not get the ball to stick or something like that, and even that scenario outside as well. Where it might not be where our lie is altered, it's where we can't get the ball to stop. The ball embeds on a slope, and when we try to place it back after they get embedded ball relief or something like that, well, I guess that wouldn't apply either because it's 1 stroke, so that's a bad example. But maybe it's that example where I think Phil, like at the Masters, hit it on 17 and the ball embedded in the green, and he couldn't get to stop on the slope, and so he needs to go to the nearest most similar line. He keeps moving to place it in that scenario.
Yeah, well, that's in E, Kyle, 14.2E, and there
Right.
isn't any limitation.
Yeah.
Right.
I think the question A answer didn't have similar lie in it. So that might be, one of those, they're messing with you on the answer that it's so close, it's hard to tell the difference.
Right, okay, I agree with it. It's another one I got wrong.
Hey, Mike, look at the paragraph right below that at the bottom paragraph. It says if the player knows that the original lie was altered, but does not know what the lie was,
Okay,
the player must estimate the original lie and replace the ball under 1 or 2.
okay.
So whether it's in a bunker or anywhere else on the course, he has the ability to do that.
Okay. Not the first time I've been confused, as you know.
We know that, Mike.
Man, shots are fired.
Oh, I know. I got Robert to speak. I'm muting myself. I'm laughing too hard.
All right. Well, it was a good discussion there. I think most of the people left because they didn't want to hear our jabber back and forth. But if there's any other questions, feel free to let me know. I'll stay on the line here for our next couple minutes and answer anything. Just a quick update. Tournament registration has been going well. We've had a lot of tournaments, or not a lot, but a handful of tournaments fill up already. So if you're a player and a referee, make sure if you haven't signed up yet that you get signed up, because there's going to be a couple events that are going to get filled up here in the next couple of days, so or weeks. So get signed up if you're not signed up already. People want to play in our tournaments, which is great. So we're going to have a lot of full fields and angry moms and dads at junior events not being able to get in because they didn't sign up in time. So,
Quick question on that. If you are an official, would you discourage us from signing up for a tournament where the number of people you are seeking is already available? Or do you want us to sign up anyway?
yeah, good question. I would encourage you to sign up for events that you want to do, even if we do have more people.
Okay.
Unless there's another event that day that you can go to instead. Because one thing that we do have a lot of new folks getting involved, which is great. So some of the people that are listed are going to be trainees and not necessarily on trouble holes. We'll in most cases take whatever help we can get, and especially if you're looking to get experience, it doesn't hurt to get out there and be involved more. And if we do want to cut back the number of people, we'll definitely do that. The other thing I should have said too is that we have added a few extra qualifiers, some junior things that were kind of last minute ads. So there are a few more opportunities on the website for some junior qualifiers to sign up for. If you haven't looked in a while, I'd recommend logging in and taking a look.
Hey, I have a suggestion for your IT folks. So I'm going through the tournament and I'm trying to pick the ones that I can help with. And the thing is that when you go in and fill in your time and come back, it always takes you to the very, very beginning of the list rather than where you were. Can your IT people work on that?
So I think Robert, if you go in and there's a drop down that says my schedule. I think if you click that drop down, it will pull up the events that you signed up for.
No, I'm talking about during the process of signing up. So say I sign up for the kids event and I'm going down the list, and then you go into fill in your time saying, I will work this event. And when you come back, it takes you to the very, very first event in the list.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So it has no memory as to where you were.
So if I signed up for an event in August and then I wanted to sign up for an event in September, after I did the event in August, it would take me back to April and I'd have to scroll all the way back down.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a few extra keystrokes.
All right. Yeah, we will bring that to the attention of our programmer and we'll see if we can get that resolved. We do have, I think many of you guys on the call know, but we do have a single programmer that does programming for everything: handicapping, membership, course rating, tournament volunteers. So I'm not saying that we won't get to it, but don't expect to see it tomorrow.
Oh, I'm almost done, so don't worry about me.
But no, it is a good suggestion there for sure.
Kyle, this is Dennis Walsh. I have a question. I'm one of those referenced new people.
Yeah.
Where is the so-called GAM hard card?
Yep. So that I believe is on our volunteer page, but you'll also get it in the packet. So this one, it might not be up there because we haven't finalized the 2022 version, but this conditions of competition is the quote unquote GAM hard card, and it'll be in your packet that you get for every tournament. But once it's finalized, we'll definitely have it up on the site for everyone to view. And these are kind of just general things that apply to all tournaments. But there could be situations that, specifically at a tournament, that we might override one of these things that are listed here.
Understood. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, thanks, Carl. We'll see you next week.
Thank you very much.